The world outside is growing quiet, and a story is waiting for you in the stillness. Welcome to Midnight Murmurs Studio, your safe harbor from the noise of the day. Find a comfortable place, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Before our story begins, a gentle reminder for your peaceful rest. For the deepest sleep, it's best to keep your phone at a safe distance from your head. So please take a moment to place your phone on a nearby table or chair. And while it's in your hand for this last moment, a quick tap on like and subscribe becomes a quiet signal to us, a soft murmur in the dark that lets us know these stories are a comfort to you. It's what keeps our studio going. Thank you for that. Now, settle in the oldest quarter of the city of Bruges, where the canals reflected the stepped gables of medieval houses, and the swans slept with their heads tucked under their wings, there was a scent that defied the winter chill. It was not the smell of waffle irons or frying potatoes which permeated the tourist squares. It was something deeper, darker, and infinitely more complex. It was the scent of roasting cocoa beans mingled with Madagascar vanilla and burnt sugar. Following this invisible ribbon of scent down a narrow cobblestone alley, one would find a shop with a window frame painted a deep, glossy maroon. The glass was thick and slightly wavy with age, protecting the treasures inside from the biting wind. The sign above the door was modest, etched in gold leaf. L'Alchimie du Cacao, the alchemy of cocoa. Inside, the world was bathed in amber light. The walls were lined with mahogany shelves displaying jars of spices, cardamom, chili, sea salt, and cinnamon barks rolled like ancient scrolls. But the centerpiece of the shop was the tempering table. It was a massive slab of cool, gray Carrara marble, polished to a smoothness that rivaled a frozen lake. The master of this domain was Monsieur Henri. Henri was a man who moved with the fluidity of the very substance he worked with. He wore a crisp white apron over a shirt the color of espresso. His hands were large but incredibly gentle, constantly stained with the faint brown dust of cocoa powder. He did not rush. Chocolate, he knew, could not be rushed. If you hurried the melting, it became grainy. If you hurried the cooling, it became dull. Henri lived by the thermometer and the clock, finding a rhythmic peace in the precision of temperature. The evening snow had begun to fall, dusting the cobblestones in white sugar. The shop was quiet, the only sound being the gentle hum of the melting tanks. The door opened, triggering a soft chime. A young man walked in. He was still wearing his chef's whites, though they were stained and rumpled. He had not bothered to put on a coat, and he was shivering violently. His name was Lucas. He was a rising star in the culinary world, a pastry chef known for his intricate architectural desserts. But tonight, he looked like a structure that had collapsed. Lucas walked to the counter and leaned heavily against it, burying his face in his hands. His breathing was ragged. He looked up at Henri, his eyes bloodshot and wide with panic. "It ruined," Lucas whispered, his voice cracking. "The ganache broke. The sculpture collapsed. Everything I touched today, it fell apart. I have lost the touch, Henri. I am too rigid. I snap like cheap chocolate." Henri wiped the marble table with a clean cloth. He looked at the young chef with compassion. He saw the problem immediately. Lucas was vibrating with tension. He was trying to force the ingredients to obey him rather than listening to what they needed. "You are not brittle, Lucas," Henri said softly, his voice deep and warm like melted butter. "You have been through the fire, yes, but you did not allow yourself to cool down properly. That is why you are breaking." Lucas shook his head. "I don't have time to cool down. The competition is in 2 days. I need to practice. I need to make it perfect." "Perfection," murmured, walking around the counter, "is not about force. It is about alignment. Chocolate teaches us this. If the molecules are not aligned, the chocolate is dull and soft. If they are aligned, it shines and snaps. Tonight, we will align you." "Keep the door and turn the sign to Ferme." He led Lucas to the back of the workshop, away from the display cases, to the heart of the operation. Here, sackcloth bags filled with raw cocoa beans were stacked against the wall. "We start at the beginning," Henri said. "Before it is smooth, it is rough. Before it is sweet, it is bitter." He opened a sack. The beans inside were pale purple and brown, covered in a papery skin. They smelled acidic, raw, and earthy. Nothing like the chocolate bar one buys at a store. "Put your hands in," Henri commanded. Lucas hesitated, then plunged his hands into the sack of raw beans. They were cold and hard. They rattled against each other as he moved his fingers, a dry, rustling sound that felt grounding. The texture was rough, scratching gently against his skin. "These beans have potential," Henri said, "but they are locked. To release the flavor, we must apply heat. But we must be careful. Too much heat, and they burn to charcoal. Too little, and they remain sour." He scooped a measure of beans into a roaster. He turned the dial. As the drum began to turn, a slow, rhythmic tumbling sound filled the room. "Listen," Henri whispered. "The heat is waking them up." Lucas leaned against the sack. The repetitive sound of the beans tumbling in the roaster was like the sound of ocean waves on a pebble beach. It was a constant, steady noise that drowned out the frantic thoughts in his head about the failed sculpture. He watched the drum turn, round and round. There was no beginning and no end, just the cycle. After 20 minutes, the smell in the room changed. The acidity vanished, replaced by the deep, intoxicating aroma of roasted cocoa. It was a warm, heavy scent that felt like a hug. Henri stopped the roaster. He poured the hot beans onto a cooling tray. They smoked gently, releasing their essence into the cool air. "Now," Henri said, picking up a single warm bean, "we must break the shell to find the nib. The shell is the armor. It protected the bean while it grew, but now it is in the way." He pressed the bean between his thumb and forefinger. The roasted shell shattered with a crisp, dry sound. The dark, oily nib inside fell into his palm. "You have built a shell, Lucas," Henri said, handing the nib to the young chef. "You built it to survive the kitchen, the critics, the pressure. But now the shell is choking you. You must let it crack. You must let the bitterness out." Lucas took the nib. He crushed it between his fingers. The shell fell away easily. He put the nib in his mouth. It was intensely bitter, gritty and strong. It shocked his palate. "It's bitter," Lucas grimaced. "It is honest," Henri corrected. "This is the core. We add sugar later, but first you must accept the bitterness. You must accept that today was hard, that you failed. Taste the failure, Lucas. Chew it, and then swallow it." Lucas chewed. The bitterness spread over his tongue. But as he swallowed, he felt a strange release. He wasn't fighting the failure anymore. He was consuming it. He was processing it. The tension in his chest began to loosen, mirroring the cracking of the cocoa shells on the tray. He was ready to be ground down, ready to be transformed.
Keep to the melting tank. Inside, the processed cocoa nibs had been ground and heated until they surrendered their fat, transforming into a dark, luxurious liquid known as chocolate liquor. He added sugar and vanilla, stirring the mixture until it was seamless. He dipped a large ladle into the tank. The chocolate was dark as midnight, thick and heavy. He filled a copper bowl with the molten substance. It radiated a gentle heat, smelling sweet and intoxicating. "The chocolate is hot," Henri explained, carrying the bowl to the marble table. "It is at 45 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, the molecules are chaotic. They are floating around freely, unconnected. If we let it cool just like this, it will be grainy. It will not snap, it will not shine. To give it strength, we must teach it discipline. He tilted the bowl over the cold slab of Carrara marble. The chocolate poured out in a wide ribbon-like curtain. It hit the stone without a splash, pooling silently into a glossy black lake. The contrast between the steaming hot liquid and the freezing cold stone was visually striking. The edges of the puddle immediately began to set, turning slightly matte as the stone leached the heat away. Lucas watched the flow. It was mesmerizing. The chocolate looked like a living thing, expanding, breathing, reflecting the amber lights of the shop on its mirror-like surface. It looked endless and deep, a pool you could fall into. "We pour out 2/3, Henri murmured, setting the bowl with the remaining third aside. "We keep some hot to welcome the cold back home later. But for now, we must agitate." Henri picked up 2 tools, a wide metal scraper and a long, flexible palette knife. He handed a second set to Lucas. "Move it," Henri commanded gently. "Do not let it sit. Spread it thin, then gather it up, then spread it again. It is a dance." Lucas hesitated, then stepped up to the marble. He placed his scraper against the stone. He pushed the pool of chocolate. It offered a heavy, satisfying resistance. It felt like pushing heavy silk. He spread it out towards the edges of the table, creating a thin, vast sheet of darkness. Then he used the palette knife to scrape it back into the center. The metal blade slid across the marble with a rhythmic, friction-filled sound, a sound like skates on ice or a sword being sheathed. It was a clean, sharp sound that punctuated the silence. Spread, gather, spread, gather. Henri worked opposite him. Their movements fell into a synchronization. The chocolate swirled between them. As they worked, the liquid began to change. It cooled rapidly against the stone. It became thicker, more viscous. It started to drag against the scraper. "We are aligning the crystals," Henri whispered, not stopping the rhythm. Cocoa butter has 6 different crystal forms. Only one of them, form V, is stable. Only form V gives the shine and the snap. By moving it, by cooling it, we are forcing the chaos to align into this one perfect structure. Lucas realized he wasn't just cooling chocolate. He was organizing it. He was taking a hot, messy situation and, through constant rhythmic motion, turning it into something stable. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. His own mind, chaotic and overheated, felt like it was being spread out on the cold stone. The frantic thoughts cooling down, aligning into a pattern that made sense. The chocolate was now a thick paste. It no longer flowed, it slumped. It had lost its high gloss sheen and taken on a satin, matte finish. "It is ready," Henri observed, touching the mass with the back of his finger. "It is cool. The crystals have formed. Now we must stop the cooling before it becomes a solid block." He scraped the thick, cool chocolate off the marble and plopped it back into the copper bowl, where the remaining hot chocolate waited. The solid mass sank into the liquid warmth. "Stir," Henri said. "Marry them together." Lucas took the wooden spoon. He stirred the cool, thick paste into the hot liquid. The heat from the reserve chocolate melted the paste just enough to make it fluid again, but the stable crystals remained. The mixture turned smooth, glossy, and impossibly shiny. It was no longer too hot and no longer too cold. It was tempered. "Look at it," Henri said softly. Lucas lifted the spoon. The chocolate flowed off it in a continuous, heavy ribbon. It piled up on itself in the bowl, folding like fabric, like heavy velvet drapes falling to the floor. It was the most beautiful texture Lucas had ever seen. It looked perfect. "It flows," Lucas whispered, "but it has structure." "Exactly," Henri smiled. "It is fluid, yet strong. That is the balance we seek. You can be soft, Lucas, and still be unbreakable." The smell of the tempered chocolate was now at its peak, round, full, and sweet. It filled the entire shop, pushing away the memory of the winter cold. It was a smell of comfort, of luxury, of problems being solved by warmth and time. "How do we know if it is right?" Lucas asked. "We test," Henri replied. He dipped the tip of a palette knife into the bowl, coating it in the glossy brown liquid. He set the knife down on the counter. "Watch." They waited. In the cool air of the shop, the thin layer of chocolate on the knife began to set. It didn't take long. Within 2 minutes, the wet look vanished, replaced by a soft, satin sheen. Henri picked up the knife. He touched the chocolate. It was dry. He peeled the strip of chocolate off the metal. He held it up to Lucas's ear. "Listen." Henri snapped the strip in half. Snap. It was a sharp, crisp sound, a clean break. The chocolate didn't bend, it didn't crumble. It snapped with authority. "Perfect," Henri declared. "It is tempered. It is ready to become anything we want it to be." Lucas looked at the broken piece of chocolate. It was shiny on the inside, showing a tight, perfect grain. He thought about his failed sculpture earlier that day, how it had crumbled because he hadn't taken the time to prepare the foundation. He realized he had been trying to build with chaos. Now he understood the value of the cooling process. "We are ready to mold," Henri said, handing Lucas a ladle. "The chocolate is waiting for a shape, and you, my friend, are the one to give it." Henri brought out a tray of polycarbonate molds. They were clean, polished to a high sheen, and shaped like simple, rectangular bars. There were no intricate swirls, no architectural shapes, just pure, honest blocks. "Pour," Henri said. "Do not hesitate. Fill the space." Lucas ladled the tempered chocolate into the molds. The liquid was thick and glossy, flowing like black satin. It filled the cavities of the mold, rising to the rim. It was a deeply satisfying sight, watching the empty space being erased by the rich, dark substance. Once the molds were full, Henri showed him how to tap them against the counter. He lifted the tray slightly and let it drop. The sound was a dull, rhythmic thud against the marble. "We tap to release the air," Henri explained. "Air bubbles are the enemy of density. We want the chocolate to be solid. We want it to be heavy." As they tapped, tiny bubbles rose to the surface and popped, leaving the chocolate perfectly smooth. Lucas watched the surface settle. It was like a dark mirror, reflecting his own face. But the reflection wasn't distorted by anxiety anymore. It was calm. They placed the trays into the cooling cabinet. It was not a freezer, but a cool, dry chamber with a gentle airflow. "Now," Henri said, wiping his hands, "we wait for the contraction. As the crystals set, the chocolate will shrink slightly. It will pull away from the mold. It will let go." Lucas sat on a stool, leaning his back against the warm counter. He thought about that phrase, "It will let go." He realized that he had been holding on to his stress, gripping it tight like a lifeline. He needed to be like the chocolate. He needed to contract, to pull away from the pressure and just let go. 20 minutes passed in comfortable silence. The smell of the shop had mellowed into a sweet, lingering background note. Henri opened the cooling cabinet. He took out the tray. He held it up and looked at the underside. "See," he pointed, "the air gap. It has released itself." He turned the mold upside down over the marble table and gave it a single sharp twist. With a sound like heavy rain hitting a roof, the chocolate bars fell out of the mold and landed on the stone. They were flawless. They shone with a brilliance that looked like polished obsidian or dark glass. There were no streaks, no dull spots, just perfect tempered chocolate. Lucas picked one up. It felt cool and hard in his hand. It had a weight to it, the weight of quality. "Taste it," Henri urged. "This is your work." Lucas broke off a piece. The snap was loud and clean, a gunshot of perfection in the quiet room. He placed the piece on his tongue. He let it melt. He didn't chew. He let the heat of his mouth unlock the flavor. It was smooth. It was intensely chocolatey, with notes of fruit and earth, and just enough sweetness to lift the spirit. There was no grit. It was like velvet dissolving into silk. "It's simple," Lucas whispered, closing his eyes. "It's just chocolate, but it's the best thing I've ever made." "Complexity is often a mask for insecurity," Henri said gently. "When the foundation is strong, you do not need to hide it behind sugar flowers and spun sugar cages. You are good enough, Lucas, just as you are, tempered and strong." Lucas packed the chocolate bars into small parchment bags. He moved with a new calmness. His hands, which had been shaking when he arrived, were now steady. "Take them," Henri said. "Eat one before your competition. Remind yourself of the snap. Remind yourself of the patience." Lucas put the bag in his pocket. He took off the borrowed apron and folded it neatly. He felt different. He felt cooler, but in a good way, controlled, not frantic. "Thank you, Henri," Lucas said. I think I was trying to run before I learned to walk." "We all do," Henri smiled. "The secret is to go back to the beans, go back to the roast, start over." Lucas walked to the door. He opened it, and the winter air rushed in to greet him. But it didn't bite him this time. He felt insulated by the warmth of the chocolate and the wisdom of the old man. He stepped out onto the snowy street. The canal water was black and still, reflecting the moon. Lucas walked home, his boots crunching softly on the snow. He didn't think about the judges or the critics. He thought about the flow of the chocolate on the marble. He thought about the alignment of crystals. He felt aligned. He felt ready. Henri watched Lucas disappear into the snowy night. He nodded to himself, a small gesture of satisfaction. Another soul tempered, another temper restored. He cleaned the marble table one last time, polishing it until it gleamed. He scraped the last bits of chocolate from the bowl, the chef's treat, and ate it, enjoying the familiar comfort of his life's work. He turned off the melting tanks. The hum of the machines died down, leaving a profound silence in the shop. The jars of spices stood guard on the shelves, their shadows long and soft. Henri walked to the back room where his small living quarters lay. He washed the cocoa dust from his hands. He changed into his night clothes. He lay down in his bed, pulling a heavy down comforter over himself. The room smelled faintly of vanilla and roasted beans, a scent that had seeped into the very wood of the building over the centuries. He closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw the river of dark chocolate flowing endlessly, smooth and calm. He saw the shine of the finished bars. His breathing slowed, becoming deep and rhythmic. The world outside was frozen and still, but inside, everything was warm, everything was sweet, and everything was in its perfect place. And in the heart of the velvet night, the chocolatier drifted into a deep, dreamless, and sugar-spun sleep.
And so, our story comes to a gentle close. May your mind be calm, and your dreams be kind. If you're still listening, we'll be waiting for you here again with another story from Midnight Murmurs Studio. Until then, sleep well.